Hello and welcome to Wildcat Comms. Today we're kicking off the Amateur Radio Introductory Concepts series. Episode 1, we're going to talk about philosophy of use, and what we hope this will serve as is a foundation for how you're going to think about yourself when it comes to being the radio or comms guy, okay, the comms person. We're going to talk about what scenarios we might be preparing for, what gear we might need and what gear we don't need, what skills we need for these scenarios, and how we can test our gear and practice our skills. And we'll go over some learning materials and learning resources that we can use to get us started. But right off the bat, let's talk about some real fundamental concepts here to reinforce this. You may look at this image on the left and say, yeah, that looks a lot like what the gear I'm going to be running is, and I sure hope not, because I don't think that with a $35 Chinese radio, rubber duck antenna, and no spare battery, that is the radio guy on your team, you're going to give anybody any semblance of confidence that you are going to make the contacts it takes when the shit is hitting the fan, okay? Now, I'm not trying to crap on these Baofeng radios because I have 3 of them. Okay, I've got one right here. These are fine radios for certain circumstances. But as we'll, just show here in the forthcoming slides, they're not sufficient for a lot of uses, okay? Now, perhaps you're going to be in a scenario like we'll roll out right here, where it's WROL, SHTF, and you're operating as part of a search and rescue squad with 2 patrol teams, black team and white team, okay? Impaler is your leader, Vampire is your HQ. He talks to a total of 4 squads, 3 others besides yourself, and you're Apostle in this example, okay? Now let's talk, I can see the FUDs, they're gonna have an aneurysm here on this one, I love it. But let's say, for example, that you are operating in a WROL scenario where everything's out the window, and it doesn't matter whether everyone on your team is a licensed operator or not, okay? Now, we strongly encourage everyone to be a licensed operator for many reasons, and we'll get into some of those benefits. But really, there's going to be certain scenarios where it doesn't matter, okay? And you'll be functioning under tactical call signs, okay? Again, Apostle, Butcher, Catfish, whatever. So in this example, everyone's got UV5Rs, and they're on low power with rubber duck antennas, and they're talking to each other. But as the radio comms guy, again, you need to be able to reach out to Vampire, maybe make contact with some of these other squads, and have a higher level than some of these other guys in your team for radio. You need to be the guy, okay? There's other guys in your team that fill other roles, and you would expect them to have the necessary gear to complete their mission. They're counting on you, so let's think about what that means. Okay, while you may not be a 65-year-old guy with white hair, maybe the gear you're going to use looks a lot like this. And, hey, let's bear in mind, too, that these guys weren't old forever. They used to be young like us once, and we'll be old like them soon, so there's that. But let's make note here, and we could go back to the last slide, but everyone here is taking notes. That'll be a theme that we should be bearing in mind. Everyone's writing stuff down. Information is key. Information is power. Knowledge is power. So you already know probably that scanning around the band, there's a lot of stuff going on. In an emergency, we'll be writing information down. We'll come back to that. That's a key concept here. But maybe you should start thinking about different applications. And when we have a gear episode in the future, we'll talk about that. But again, we want it to serve the mission. It's not just going to be, the cheap thing we can find. We want reliable quality gear because, again, we're the guy. People are counting on us. Okay, now 1773 versus 2023. Unfortunately, we live in a time where you can't just get the other lads from the militia down to the town square and start LARPing around. And I want to be clear, I mean LARPing in a good way. I feel like in this country, everyone from 16 to 60 should have kit and weapons and ammo and train with it all the time. And I feel very strongly that that sort of thing being widespread with regular people is what keeps us from having to go Jeffersonian on our own government. And I see you glowies out there, so don't think we don't see you out there. That's all I'm saying. Okay, so, we are not going to do necessarily socially awkward LARPing, sadly enough, but there is plenty of opportunities for radio guys to do full throttle LARPing all the time, whenever we want, right? Now, we may be socially awkward, some of these cats, but we're definitely socially acceptable. Notice again, everybody here is a professional looking person with high quality gear. They're making notes of information that they're receiving. They're prepared to write stuff down. Whether they're transmitting it or not, they're making note of it. And again, information is power. Now, speaking of writing stuff down, if you don't have a Write in the Rain notebook and you're doing any kind of operations or recon work, if you're doing anything with a radio at all, and you don't have a Write in the Rain notebook and a couple of pencils, you are doing your life wrong. You need to reevaluate it. It is going to be as key to have that as any piece of kit or any piece of gear. You absolutely have to have one of these Write in the Rain notebooks. I like pencils from the golf course. I find people that go golfing, I say, hey, snag me some pencils. They're stubby, they don't break. You can keep them in all kinds of pockets and stuff, and it's handy, but you got to have one of these Write in the Rain notebooks. Okay, let's talk about LARPing a little bit more for radio guys. Now, there's a lot of different opportunities. One of them is called Parks on the Air. It's like everything in radio, it's kind of contest-based, point system. You can care about that if you want. I personally care very little, but it's a great opportunity to get out there and use radios that are on emergency power, right? Batteries, solar, that kind of setups, mobile operations, okay? So you'll be using the exact same gear that you'll be using in disaster recovery, emergency comms, SHTF, and sure, maybe you would have, instead of being out there, dressed in civilian clothes, perhaps you'd have camis and an AR and, be in a sandbag position or something. But until then, you can get out there, you can LARP all the time and get on the air making contacts. There's places that are being activated all over the place, so don't think that there isn't something for you out there. Another great opportunity to LARP with our radio gear is public service events. And public service events include everything from parades and bicycle races, foot races, fun runs, like 5Ks and stuff like that, rally races, car races. But these opportunities present us the ability to level up, because here at public service events, we'll have defined roles and responsibilities, and people will be counting on us to deliver with our gear and our skills. And so I know right now people are asking, why are you showing a picture of some really old guy sitting on the side of the road? But that guy is an operator, and he's probably a very elite operator, because he's out there, he's at this race, he's checking his gear, he's continuing to keep his skills sharp, he's making improvements to his kit all the time. And look, he's old, sure, but he's been doing this a long time. He's been providing a valuable service. He's probably sharing his knowledge with the next generation. So I would submit that this is a very elite operator. Let's go over some scenarios of increasing intensity, I guess you could say, that sort of reinforce this whole thing that we're trying to tie together. And fun runs are a great first example to get in there and level up, because you might be positioned at an intersection that you're blocking off, or maybe at a spectator area, and someone comes up to you, this group comes up to you, they've got this woman they're carrying, she blew her knee out, she rolled her ankle, she's in a lot of pain, and they need you to get the EMTs down there to get her the medical attention that she needs. It may not sound like a big deal, but when she's in pain, her and her friends and her family are counting on you to have the right gear and to be able to make the contact in a reliable way. Another great elite way to level up your skills with public service is rally races. These are timed motocross races, not motocross, but like timed car races. They happen off-road, like on logging roads and stuff, and cars are released in 1-minute increments. This is a real scenario that happened a few years ago at this rally in Maine and New Hampshire called the New England Forest Rally. And for the sake of this incident, we'll show from the perspective of the person who was on the radio at the spectator area, okay? And they were about 100 meters from this corner where the cars go around real fast and kick up a lot of dirt. And so people park in this giant grassy area, and they get out there and have some beers and watch the cars go by, which is great, until this guy here on the bottom left, professional rally driver Ken Block, he comes around the corner really fast, has some kind of malfunction with his engine or his transmission, causes him to roll the car twice into the grass, or rather into the trees, about 100 meters from the spectator area. And to keep the car light, a lot of the parts are made of magnesium. That also makes them very flammable. So as he and his co-driver are getting out of the vehicle, because thankfully they rolled, but they were all buckled in and caged up. They were not knocked unconscious, so they were able to get out. But now everything's on fire. And so you run over there about 100 meters, and you see Ken and his co-driver, who appear to be okay, but wow, the car is totally engulfed in flames. It's starting to burn up the canopy of the trees, and the spectators are freaking out a little bit, like, whoa, is Ken okay? And like, holy smokes, the woods is starting to catch on fire. And in the back of your mind, you know that any second now, another car is going to come by at about 90 miles an hour or something, and you need to be able to immediately, effectively get a hold of Start for the stage captain to tell him that there's a red cross on the stage, there's, you know, a car on fire, you need to hold all cars at all positions. I need medical, I need fire, blah, 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 blah. We have a driver, they're not hurt. Whatever you need to relay, you need to do that. But then on top of it, and this map in the middle will illustrate, oh yeah, you have topography that you're working around. And depending on what position you're at here, and this is a map from the actual rally. I don't think it's the exact stage, but it's from within a couple of miles of where this happened on one of the other stages. You can see, depending on where you're at here, like, you have topography to fight as well as distance. It's a 16-mile course. You know, you could be operating in very adverse conditions. It could be raining, you know, it could be, you know, very hard to make some of these contacts. But again, Ken, his co-driver, the spectators, they're counting on you to do the right thing and have the right gear. Now, fortunately, Ken and his co-driver were fine, as we mentioned, but they did, you know, Ken Block unfortunately passed away this winter in a snowmobiling accident, so let's mention that. And it goes to show you, though, that anything can happen. You need to be prepared. If you can't handle being prepared at a public service event, how are you going to be prepared to be the comms guy when we're in a live fire, militarized SHTF situation? You have to be on the ball. Okay, one more example to kind of illustrate this whole thing, and that's the Boston Marathon. It's a 26-mile marathon course, and you know, to start out the morning, you're having a great time. It's a very elite event, so there's a lot of skilled operators there. It's kind of a big deal to be a part of it. Everything's fine until the bomb goes off, and then suddenly you're part of a 26-mile-long incident. There's injuries, there's casualties, there's a lot of evacuation that needs to happen. You have to work with law enforcement and medical and fire, government agencies, local and state. You have to be at the top of your game if you're working at this kind of event. And again, if you can't handle this, how are you going to handle some of the bigger things? Okay, and you can't be prepared for the day that you wake up in the morning and your town has been annihilated by a tornado, and everyone's counting on you to be the guy. They know that you have the radio gear and that you're supposed to be the guy. So if you don't have your stuff sorted out, and if you're not squared away, you're going to be letting a lot of people down. Don't do that. Don't be the guy at position Juliet that they're trying to reach out to. Juliet, are you there? Juliet, do you copy? They're going to send someone to your location. What are they going to find? They're going to find you with your piece of crap $35 radio, and you're going to be, well, yeah, sorry, I dropped it, and you know, the battery case came loose, and the battery didn't power the radio anymore, and anyways, the antenna snapped off immediately, and oh, this is Julie, and she's hurt, and can you call an ambulance? Sorry. Don't be that person. You're gonna make yourself look like a jerk, and everyone's gonna be thinking that you're an idiot, okay? People are gonna be hurt, they're gonna be counting on you, you're gonna be letting the team down. Everyone else is gonna be prepared in their role, be squared away, Don't let everyone down. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the gear here. Again, these radios are fine on the left, these Baofangs, but they have their place. Right off the bat, we want to tell you, don't fool around, don't be confused by DMR and D-Star. Buy an analog radio, okay? Almost everything you're going to do is analog radios. And I heard somebody talking about hype beasts on Instagram slanging all these digital and encrypted. That's bogus. You're never going to use that. We'll go over ways that you can do, you know, OPSEC and all that kind of stuff. But until then, just don't worry about it. And if you are on a budget, get the Baofang, okay, while you save up, because it can be intimidating. There's a lot of different kinds of radios. This is just a small sample of them. I personally have the one on the bottom right, the Yaesu FT60. It's a fantastic radio. It's rugged. I've used this in all different kind of weather conditions, all different kind of temperatures. I've operated all over the country with this radio. It's fantastic. It's a lot of things that the Baofang will never be, except for cheap. And so bear in mind that, you know, while you're out there trying to figure out what move to make, maybe buy the cheap radio to begin with, but don't think that you can just count on it. You can't. Okay. Now you also want to think about what not to buy in terms of accessories. Okay. Don't spend a lot of money on a radio that isn't going to be your main tool in the toolbox. Okay. We can talk about some upgrades that you can do to improve what you'll get out of it, and we'll talk about those in the accessories video, upgrades video. But for now, don't spend money on Baofang accessories if you know that you're just going to get an EmComm. Okay, and make your EmComm your number one workhorse radio, which perhaps it should be. So there's that. You know, they're also not great for operational security in the sense that I was listening to this all tied in. I listened to a couple guys the other day talking on their Baofangs, and they were setting them up and whatever. And the one guy, after a few minutes, he says, "Man, my hand feels really weird, man. My hand is going numb." Well, yeah, it's nuking you basically, man, okay? And it'd be the same thing as if you were saying, "Oh, you know, we were only operating for a minute. I don't understand how those guys, how they found where we, you know, our position or whatever." Well, it's because not only were you transmitting on the frequency you were transmitting on, but if you looked on a software-defined radio, which in this imaginary scenario, these guys were looking at the spectrum, they would see not only your transmission, but like all the harmonics that you blasted out. So they're not a great radio for that operational security or for, you know, reliability or whatever, but they're good to get started. So bear that in mind. I'll put a link in the description and a title card up here. There's a guy that has a spectrum analyzer, and he hooks one of these up to it, and you can see what I was talking about with the harmonics and stuff. It's, you know, it is what it is, but it's not what it's not. Okay, radiograms. Let's talk a little bit about sending traffic and the kind of messages that you might send or receive in specificity, right? We don't want you to get too worried about digital modes. There's a ton of digital modes out there. It can be very confusing. We'll do an episode on that. We'll probably do a whole series on that, but don't worry about that for now. Let's talk about radiograms. It's basically a telegram for the radio, and it's a format that's used both on the national traffic system and off. But we do want to talk about one digital mode before we get a little bit crazy, and that is Radiogram. Just for fun, we'll talk about Radiogram because it'll give you a taste of how powerful digital modes can really be and some of the applications that you might use them for. Here's a QR code. You know, download this on your smartphone. That's what the icon looks like. Set the app up. It'll just listen. I'll transmit a message now so you can pause the video or come back another time. You'll see how in 2 seconds I transmit this message, how powerful it is when you decode it. Ready? So that was a 2-second message, and when you have your phone ready to decode that some other time when you watch this video, you'll see just how powerful that can be. Okay, now let's talk about this national traffic system. Basically, it's a way where you can connect to a local net, probably on a repeater once a day or, you know, once a week or something like that, depending on your area. It'll be a 2-meter repeater probably, where you can connect and pass one of these radiograms where people will have traffic they're sending back and forth. From there, the message is sent to a section net. Section is just another word for state. Then the regions get bigger until you pass the message across the country and back down the food chain to someone's local network again. And basically, the network is broken down into, the country is rather broken down into different regions. That sort of helps you understand what's going on here. And again, as we said before, most of the messages are inconsequential. They're just, happy birthday, whatever. But these are examples of messages that you might be transmitting or something like that, right? To Bob, I am okay. I've been evacuated from the building. That sounds pretty important. To Incident Command Center, can you send a relief operator to staging area? Query, if so, please advise ETA from incident staging area. And the final one, to Red Cross Disaster Office, need more cots and sanitation kits at all 5 shelters from Shelter Manager. So again, these are examples of traffic you might be passing on and off the NTS. You can log in. They ask for people with or without traffic to check in. You can check in or not. It's up to you. You can listen. You can print some of these off the internet in PDF form and listen at how guys are writing them down. And we'll include a link in the description so that you can watch a couple videos on people doing that. But again, make sure your skills are up to the challenge as much as your gear, because people are going to be counting on you. It's very important. Let's revisit this slide from the beginning. We're almost done here. Let's revisit this slide here. Again, you are Apostle, okay? You're part of this search and rescue squad with 2 patrol teams. And remember, Vampire, that's your HQ. And remember, Vampire talks to 3 other squads besides you. But let's see what this is like from Vampire's perspective. Okay? Vampire here, you can see, has 2 primary, 2 frequencies, a primary and an alternate frequency that they are transmitting and receiving on, okay? And they have basically developed a comms plan for 4 squads that includes each squad having their own primary and alternate frequency so they can communicate amongst each other. And then they've got 4 check-in times throughout the day that they'll be responsible for checking in with Vampire according to this comms plan. And they may be digital, maybe voice, but they'll be on this 146-400, let's say, with an alternate frequency 147-435. And whatever the format that they've come up with in advance, that'll be how they communicate. But let's think about this, right? Who is Vampire in all of this? If you thought you were Apostle, right? If you thought you were Apostle and you were just one of 9 guys in a squad, you're just the radio guy, who's Vampire? Maybe you're Vampire. Maybe you got to get your skills and your gear up to par where you can be Vampire. And you might not have 4 squads that you're in charge of. Maybe you have 2, maybe you have 3. This is a very basic comms plan. Maybe you don't need to have 4 check-ins a day, but maybe you have some variation of this comms plan. Maybe you have some other things going on that make this more complicated. Are you ready to be Vampire? Do you have what it takes? Can you build your skills? You probably don't have that right now, and that's okay. But that should be the goal, right? It's not just so that you can be effective as being Apostle in your squad, but that you can be Vampire and you can run the show when people are counting on you. You can train other people. You can build up a comms plan. You can implement this across multiple squads, okay? For various situations, this is going to come in handy. Now, I hope this ties it all together, right? Let's talk about one more thing. As a radio operator, you might consider drones because they can be a very powerful force multiplier. We've seen this in the war in the Ukraine, where drones are giving radio operators in particular the ability to see beyond their own line of sight, right? And so think about how much power that gives us, especially if a road is closed due to power lines down or some kind of damage to a bridge or something, giving us the ability and our team the ability to get information from beyond our line of sight and report that to our comrades can be very, very powerful. And yeah, there's some serious limitations, specifically price, perhaps. And then, of course, you start to carry around tons of gear. You already got your radio gear. Now you're telling me to carry your drone around. This may not work in every situation, right? These dudes up in the top right here, they are vehicle borne. So maybe if you're in a vehicle and you're the radio guy working out of a mobile unit, maybe the drone is for you, right? You pop out, you fly the drone around for a little bit, you tell the other guys on your squad what you're seeing, you report back to Vampire what you're seeing, blah, blah, blah. Maybe conversely, maybe you're a Vampire, right? And you have someone on your team in your little squad, because don't think Vampire might just be one person, okay? A Vampire could be a couple, 2, 3 people, especially if you're running a 24-hour operation, with check-ins every 6 hours across 4 squads. That's not one person. That's a couple of different people, executing this comms plan. But so think about it from that perspective. What can you offer the other people when you have the drone? Again, could be cost prohibitive, could be, gear prohibitive, but think about it. It might be a force multiplier you want to employ. Okay, getting the skills, helping the community, and being a real hero sounds lame, but we'll put links in the description to all these different groups. ARES and RACES are big ones in the community, as well as CERT is Community Emergency Response Team. And you can join a CERT team. It's light search and rescue. It's evacuation help and stuff like that. Skywarn is a great one to be involved with, depending on what part of the country you're in and what kind of weather you see. Again, we'll put links in the description, but build your skills. You get out there a couple times a year, do some stuff, do some public service events. Okay, you don't have to join every one of these organizations, but be familiar with the concepts that they have. Okay, be involved to some extent that it makes sense. Review their training materials. It can be very tedious. So this is something that you're going to want to do slowly over time. Maybe print them out and put them in a binder just in case, worst case scenario, you have to learn on the fly. That's okay too. You'll have a resource there that you can spend some time. Listen, if it's bad enough, you probably won't have anything else to do except for read the damn manual anyways. Okay. Series overview. We just did philosophy of use. The next bunch of episodes will sort of serve as a companion to getting licensed. And what we mean by that is everything that we're going to do is going to reinforce the idea that you're on your way to being a licensed operator, okay? So we'll talk about the basics of getting licensed next, tips and tricks that you can use, resources that you can use to get licensed. Then we'll talk about immediate equipment upgrades for any radio that you're using. Radio wave propagation and simplex and repeater operation are similar enough that we're going to squeeze those into one episode. Then we'll get fun and talk about mission-specific gear. We'll talk about vehicle missions. We'll talk about emergency power and off-the-grid applications. Then, of course, digital modes. Digital modes is going to be really, really important depending on what kind of applications you're using. And then who knows what else we'll talk about. We'll probably do an episode on public service events and where to get involved and what the etiquette is when you're there. Who knows what else we'll get into. We'll have to play it by ear and see what happens. But we want to thank everyone who stuck around. I hope this gave you some stuff to think about, right? Obviously, as the radio and comms person, people are going to depend on us. We have to have a certain level of skills, a certain level of knowledge that people can rely on and feel comfortable with. Again, we would count on the people who are doing their roles, right? We want the medical person on our team to have the right gear and right experience and keep up with it and practice, okay? And if someone's the designated marksman, we wouldn't expect, or they're filling the role of the heavy gunner or something, we wouldn't want that person to have an Anderson manufacturing poverty pony, right? That's probably fine for the average rifleman in our squad. But when it comes to some of these more specialized positions, we have to fill the role. We got to do the right thing. Other people are expecting us to be squared away. We should do it. We owe it to ourselves and our mission. Okay, thanks for sticking around. We really appreciate it. Put some feedback in the comments. Subscribe, like if you do. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time here on Wildcat Comms. Thanks a lot.